This is a Founding Media podcast.
Hi, everybody, foodies of the world. On today's episode of Packing Taste, we have Kirstin Ross, the new managing director for Skew ATX, an accelerator group based in Austin, Texas. Thank you for coming, Kirstin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so before we dive into what exactly Skew is, I wanted to get some information, background from you. Are you from Austin? Are you in transplant?
Who's really from Austin?
I guess nobody nowadays.
It's a rarity.
Yeah.
I've been here for 7 years. I think 28 buildings have gone up downtown. So, I could say I'm from Austin.
Now you're from Austin.
Now I'm from Austin.
Okay.
Originally, I'm from Minneapolis.
And you came here, how long you said, 27 years?
No, 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
20, I was like, you know what? Okay. And 7 years.
7 years.
I moved here 6 years ago, I think. But Austin is changing super fast, which we like. And you were doing brokerage stuff?
Yeah, I was an insurance broker before.
Okay. And now you're the new managing director for Skew.
I'm a managing director for Skew.
Okay. Awesome. Well, let's dive in. If you can tell us a little bit about why you wanted to start working with CPG companies, which, if you guys don't know by now, consumer packaged goods or foods, as I like to say. But what kind of sparked your interest towards that community?
I consider myself a very good consumer.
You love to eat.
I love to eat.
Yeah.
I grew up, with Target in my backyard and General Mills, so I always had an eye towards the retail front and the, food industry. And when I came here to Austin, I was very much enthralled with the entrepreneurial scene in the CPG space, as well as, technology and all the other wonderful areas that were entrepreneurial. But CPG is great. You can go find it in Whole Foods, put it in your pantry. You know the founder, and you can really support them and get behind them.
Yeah, for some reason, I think that startup CPG scene is a lot cooler, a little bit hipper than the tech scene. I feel like we've seen the tech scene just explode and explode and explode. Now you have this whole CPG coming in, and I don't know, people around food is a lot I get a happier sense of that than people around technology.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Because typically you see somebody who is just so passionate about their idea, and you can actually understand what their idea is, not when you go down to Capital Factory, which I love, but sometimes I'm like, oh, artificial intelligence might be a little over my head.
It's a little scary. I don't know what that
scary.
is. I'm just going to go eat a nice nutrition bar.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, so let's talk a little bit about Skew, what it is, what you guys do. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You take the lead here.
Yeah, well, Skew is on our 7th track.
Mm-hmm.
So it has had a really good, successful run. It originally started as Incubation Station, the brainchild of Sherry Ressler, who's an attorney here in town. And she was seeing these accelerators and incubators in the tech scene and was just questioning why that didn't exist in the consumer products good. And she reached out to Clayton Christopher, Joe Ross, Dan Graham, and a few others and said, hey, what if we put together a consumer products accelerator? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was the first CPG accelerator in the country. So, it was very forward-thinking when it came together. And what they do is they bring companies through a pretty tight program of 12 to 14 weeks where there's classroom days that dive deep into brand and vision to, the legal, to the operations, to capital raise.
Yeah, and is it like a once a week thing, twice a week?
It's once a week, and then there's a mentor team assigned to every company that goes through the program, and they really bring home what has been taught in class and, use some practical applications to get these companies through some of the hurdles that face, any CPG company as they grow. And so over the years, it's iterated. The mentors have, I think it started off at 25 mentors, and now we have about 65 mentors that are current for this track. And how it works is, companies apply, and there's a long, lengthy application process where we bring some in for live interviews, and then there's a negotiation because there's a logistical aspect of it. We're trying to get a good mix within our class or within each cohort. So this year, we have 7 companies going through the program. One is a traditional food company, 2 are water companies. We have a dog food company, and then 2 hardware companies, hard good companies. So it's a different mix than previous tracks that have been a little bit more food focused.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. You guys typically pick CPG food focused brands, but when I saw the list this year, it was like a sous vide for dog food, and then the hardware company, and then the grilling company. I was like, okay, this is like a very broad profile, but they're all market-ready products, right? Established or emerging brands. Are most of them in retail at this point?
All but one has sales, and there's a lot direct to consumer and some through retail.
Okay. And they could be selling traditional retail or online. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So I guess when because we have why I'm having this show is there's so many emerging brands here in Texas, and I think like everyone's kind of trying to seek help. And everyone's been super helpful with me. So I kind of wanted to highlight that. But when should, I guess, CPG brands or emerging brands start seeking help? Because when we're starting companies, we're locked up in the kitchen nonstop, testing, making sure this is like ready to be released for the people. When do you think is a good time for a brand to start seeking outside help from mentorship, investment? Is it an early stage thing? Like what based on your opinion, when do you think?
Yeah. Well, like anything, the more people you ask, the more guidance you receive, the better you can position yourself. And CPG is a little unique because there's so many different hurdles. I mean, there's the actual product development aspect of it. There's a branding and positioning. There is, weighing the different avenues to get to your consumer. Is it going to be the farmer market? Is it going to be the, boutique local stores? Is it going to be going into a Whole Foods channel? Is it going to be on Amazon? And they all have their own nuances to it. And so seeking the guidance of somebody who has walked, before them through these problems and weighing the options. I mean, it's great just to understand which direction you're going. I mean, it matters from a margins perspective. It will also matter. Just even understanding the buying structure of Whole Foods is very different than the buying structure of a Safeway versus going and just dropping off samples to a local store that will, put it on the shelves almost immediately. So, I mean, there's different thoughts behind each of it, and you can position your product and, build your financial models to support the different ways of reaching your consumer.
Yeah. I think I know for me, for example, from day one, I'm always asking questions, trying to talk to the masters in my field, kind of get advice. But I feel like a lot of founders and entrepreneurs might have this ego issue of oh well, I got this. I know my product better than anybody. I don't need advice. But I think we're both saying that it's. From early on, it's good to start seeking advice and get some help.
It's great that you know your product, but your consumers want the product you've created.
Yeah, and I mean, we're in the sauce, right? We're in there, but sometimes some insight from the outside can be a lot more helpful.
Yeah,
in certain degrees. But we can get more into that a little bit later. I want to talk about the mentors you guys have because. You said 12-week program. You guys meet once a week, and then everyone gets assigned a mentor group, right? So what kind of mentors do you guys have? So, for example, we said that you guys have a new sous vide for dogs.
Yeah.
how can your mentors help them? These mentors have had experience before. Can you talk a little bit more about the mentors?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mentors have a variety of skill sets. You'll find some that are very industry focused. You have somebody who's great at frozen food and they understand all of the different traditional like grocery and retail channels for frozen food. Now, that person is going to be a great fit for my sous vide dog food company, Grocery Pup, because they are actually selling frozen dog food in places like Whole Foods and hopefully expanding. And how you turn a SKU over or the inventory over in the frozen food section is very different than something that's shelf stable.
Yeah, it's totally different. Like I think they have to do a quicker velocity. Like their stuff melts, for example. I don't have to worry about that. I can leave my stuff in a warehouse, ranges 30 different degrees, but they can't.
Exactly.
So a mentor, you have a specified mentor for them that has seen difficulties like that before or obstacles like that before.
Yeah. And then we also, so we have a mentor that's really dedicated in the frozen food, but we also will have a mentor that's great with just finances and they've just built and scaled companies. Now, that's somebody that I also want to put on a team. They might not have any expertise in the frozen dog food company, but they understand numbers and they understand the scalability, so they can look at somebody's financial models and say, hey, here's some areas of improvement here, shipping, and they're playing around with the margins and understanding how much they need to raise and at what time and from what sort of investors. So it's not necessarily everything has to be industry related, but having a nice mix of somebody that has expertise in the industry. All of my 7 companies have a weak area, right? That I stacked a couple of mentors on their team to offset that weak area, whether it's, they just needed to perfect their branding and storytelling or market positioning or one great vegan cosmetic company needs more product development expertise, and I have a great mentor in the cosmetics industry who does a ton of product development, so I put her on the Lamique team. So it's really just finding, what needs to happen from a support perspective in each of the companies.
And how big are these mentor groups? Is it 5 per brand? Does it vary? Can one mentor hop to another one and be helpful? Because they're not competing against each other. No, we're all on the same side here, right? Because it's Austin.
Exactly. Nobody plays that game in Austin. It's definitely a collaborative city, and that's what our mentors really sign on for Skew for. So every company will have 5 or 6 mentors on their team, but they'll also have access across the mentor network. So there are some mentors that aren't assigned to a team just because they have time capacity or issues. So Leo Ressig from The Chive is a new mentor I brought on this year, and he's great, and he's brilliant when it comes to marketing and branding and being a visionary.
Sure
I mean, he's awesome, but he doesn't have the time right now to be a dedicated mentor for a team. But all of the companies will have access to him, to pick his brain, to use him in whatever way that they need to, whether it's hearing his story or just kind of bouncing ideas off of him. So we have a balance of mentors, the ones who are actually slotted for a team, and then the ones who are just part of the network.
So one of the things I'm really interested about, because I live in Houston and I have to come all the way to Austin to get the CPG vibe. And most of my mentors are here. Obviously the exploding scene is here, but what I've noticed is all these events are always packed. The Skew events, the cocktails hours are my favorite, of course, but the Skew events are awesome. I go to Barcode, Sputnik, all these other accelerators and incubator groups. They're always filled. So my question, I was sitting down in one of the events the other day, and I'm like, how are people absorbing this advice? Because I think a lot of us go to these things seeking some sort of answers or some sort of light to hit us in the face. And that never seems to be the case. It's a little bit more fluid than that. But is there a way startups or brands like mine should be managing the mentorship we get? Let's say you assign 5 mentors for a brand. it's not just about listening to everything they say, right? You got to take everything with a grain of salt.
You could get 5 different opinions from your 5 mentors.
Yes, which I have gotten before from 2 different mentors from the same old company telling me to do 2 completely separate things.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, your VP of marketing told me to do this, but you were the owner. Why are you guys saying different things? And I remember kind of panicking and being like, who's right here? So, I mean, can we say that ultimately, like, it's always going to be up to the founder or whoever CEO's decision to manage that advice you get, kind of take it in, react to it, right? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, I think some people are naturally better at receiving advice and figuring it out.
That's a skill on its own.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
And those are usually the ones who have a strong vision of what they want their company to be, and they can receive the advice and place it. Is it in alignment with what I think this company should be, or is it something that I hear and I can respond to and just choose to discard? I don't think there is always the right answer for any of this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's never going to be the right answer. You can have a company doing the exact same thing. One uses Amazon as their distribution option and getting to the customers, and one can go through a bunch of high-end boutique retailers. And, they couldn't be more different, but they could both have great success. So I don't think there's always one answer.
Yeah.
But what you can't pass up and by is the great advice that people who have actually done it successfully can give you.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. That kind of leads on to the next thing I want to talk about is the expectation applicants have or emerging brands have versus what really happens in Skew. So a great example is like what we were saying earlier is founders, CEOs, startups, we go to these events and we're like, oh, we're going to get all the knowledge. These mentors are going to be on my team. They're going
to love us and give me $1 million.
Yeah. They're going to love me. The money's going to flow my way. I have all the right answers. These guys have succeeded before. This is going to be a piece of cake. And you go in there, or at least I do. I go in there and I'm like, why don't I feel like this void filled after listening to, so-and-so from so-and-so company talk for 2 hours. So what's the reality in Skew versus this expectation? Like, I remember when I first talked about Skew with some of the mentors, I'm like, oh, you guys hand out money. You guys have all the right answers. You'll like take my hand and shake the buyer from Whole Foods for me.
Yeah.
But it's not really that, right?
It's not that. I mean, that's the quick fix. That's that enlightenment. That's that aha moment that you want to get, every time you meet somebody. And that's not what Skew is. What Skew really is the tools and the network to get you where you want to go. And it is going to be leveraging that network. So I think an expectation that I've heard from people is they assume they would go through this program and they would therefore get, they would have an easier time fundraising and they'd get the capital that they were seeking. Well, yeah, we can introduce you to all sorts of venture capital firms, private equity firms, angels and the super angels. And that's not necessarily going to mean that you are going to get funded from these individuals.
Yeah.
A good company will get funded. Yeah. But it takes becoming a good company, not just going through the program.
Yeah.
So becoming operationally better in every area and leveraging the mentor network to its fullest capability. That's saying, okay, so I have 65, maybe even 100 if you look at some of the past mentors, individuals, and I'm going down with a spreadsheet and checking them off. Like I'm going to sit down and have coffee with this person, reach out, make sure I follow up every other month with a good little update of a success that I've had. It's managing those relationships that will get you the funding that you need. It's not necessarily just going through the motions of the program and assuming at the completion of it that you're going to get the check that you might think you
Here's
need.
$10 million.
Here's $10 million.
And by leveraging, you mean like knowing how to use this advice in this network. Like you have opened up the gates for these brands and they're coming in and there's these awesome mentors, cool network, all these really good resources. And it could be a little overwhelming, but knowing how to, like, it's up to us or up to the applicants to know how to manage that stuff to then get that investment they want. Because like you said, you can introduce a brand probably to 50 different investors here in Austin, but that doesn't mean anyone's going to hand you a check.
No.
That would be awesome, but very unlikely.
Yeah. And Joe says it best, Joe Ross. Why would you seek outside capital if you could decrease your margins by 10%? Keep your cap table clean and all yourself. You make your company more efficient and better run. Put off that raise until you can do it more meaningfully on your terms, not somebody else's terms. And honestly, you're going to be in a better position because of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes you need capital to grow. Oftentimes you do in this world. But just understanding the different levers that you have to play around with is important for these businesses. And I think even that sort of insight is something that successful entrepreneurs who've had exits can give to the teams coming through Skew.
Yeah.
And it's also leveraging the network in not obvious ways. It made me feel so great. Our first class, we were doing an icebreaker kind of like a warming up before class started. And one of our teams, Boomy, is this fantastic sugarcane water. And they're trying to get out to Expo West, which is actually happening right now. Right now.
Where we're not at.
Where we're not at. And they were having a hard time getting their product out there. And one of the mentors, he's like, I've been a mentor for years, and I don't do anything exciting. I just have a freight company. And Boomy looked at him, and they were just like, we are having challenges getting our product out to Expo West. And he's like, no big deal. And literally in an hour, he's connecting them with somebody on his team to get their product moved from Austin out to California. And what they had been working days to get fixed and resolved happened within minutes. Those are the moments that you're like, and this is why Skew works. We're bringing these fantastic mentors and who can have real solutions and real guidance for these companies that have, and the companies are having real startup company challenges. And having them meet in the middle for like a good success like that is just fantastic.
Yeah. A little shout out to Expo West for you listeners, all the startups out there. Expo West is in Anaheim, California. It's one of the biggest all-natural food shows of the year. So you guys should do some research and look it up. It's I think it's bigger than the Fancy Food Show, at least the one I went to in California. So to kind of like excite some of our listeners, do you guys end up investing in these Skew companies sometimes? Because like I said, I think my understanding earlier on a year ago was like, we'll give you $8,000 for 12%. And then when I started asking around for that, it was mentors were like, no, I don't know what it is, but it's not that.
Yeah, that's not it. And I'll just disclose what we're doing this track, and it's been different over the previous tracks. It might be different next year. But for this track, how it is structured is we take 5 points of equity from each of the companies going through the program, and that equity goes into a pool that the mentors get to share in. So the mentors are incentivized to put their, their Rolodex basically available to these teams and to build these teams up to hopefully have some successful exits because they'll actually get to reap the rewards of any sort of distribution that happens from an equity perspective. And I don't think anyone views this as a fund that they're going to get rich on, but it's just a nice little carrot that everybody gets.
I mean, investors who have been in the industry before and know about this stuff, that sounds like the best kind of investor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if your grandfather offers you $20,000 to start up, that's cool. But if an expert who's been in the industry for 20 years offers you $20,000, I think that's worth a little bit more.
Yeah.
But so these 5 points aren't worth a certain amount. You guys decide that between the investors and the company.
It's by no means a valuation of the company.
Yeah.
So we do give $20,000 at the completion of the program to the companies, but don't take that $20,000 and the 5 points of equity and try to say that there's a certain valuation that we're putting on these companies. Okay. That's not it. I mean, they're two separate items. That 5% I would almost view as more just 5% access to a bunch of CEOs that you're not going to have to hire a bunch of consultants and branding experts and the freight guy that's going to make sure that your product gets out to Expo West on time so you can do a big splash. I mean, that's what those 5 points are really are for. And frequently our companies have an eye towards some sort of a raise. And they have now, a network of investors that are all accredited investors that they can be basically showcasing their hard work, their dedication, their product improvement too. So when you actually have the raise, you have a set amount of individuals that you can go to that have seen you kind of grow up through the program. And I mean, we often do sidecars, and certain investors will get behind certain companies.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome to be connected with those types of investors. Could you talk a little bit about previous success stories from Skew? Because you guys have quite a few.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm proud of all of the companies. So I was doing some research just from a numbers perspective on the success of CPG companies. So for a product, 30,000 products are launched every year, and 75% fail. So, I mean, it is
that makes me feel comfort.
Not really good statistics. But of all of our 37 companies that have gone through Skew from track 1 to 6, 97% are still in business. Yeah. So that speaks volumes.
And a couple of them have sold.
A couple of them have sold. So, you have the third. A third are just kind of hanging on. A third are doing, pretty good and nice little lifestyle businesses. And a third, you're just oh my goodness. And you just want to be their biggest cheerleader. And so Siete, one of the biggest
huge fan.
Yeah. One of the biggest raises that happened in Austin last year went through Skew, and I believe their name was Must Be Nutty when they went through Skew. We helped them with the rebranding.
Wait, Siete was Must Be Nutty?
Yeah.
Wow.
And and then they did some rebranding work, and I mean, I'm not going to try to say Skew was integral in what they were doing, but I really think we were.
A little bit,
I mean, the founders, Miguel and Veronica, are just fantastic, and the whole family is great. But they were smart individuals, and they leveraged that network. They found a couple of their biggest angels through the network. Their branding and their product is fantastic in and of itself, but they got guidance from a lot of people in turning it into, what has been such a huge success.
Yeah.
We had Epic Bar come through. So Katie and Taylor actually started out as Thunderbird, and they ended up iterating kind of through the Skew process. And, Thunderbird is still existing in one form and fashion. They broke off and did Epic
which is
as well.
They're all bison bars or something like that, right?
Well, I think they're chicken and turkey now as well, but they're the meat protein bars.
Yeah. And Siete, they do tortillas, chips, salsas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, these names are just so familiar to me.
Yeah.
So, I should probably give a little context to them.
But,
and then Seaweed Bath is another strong success.
Seaweed Bath, yes.
I mean, Pride Bites. We've had a lot.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't heard about these companies, you can Google them. And Siete, I think 2 weeks ago, got 90 million capital infusion or something.
Yes.
And Epic Bar sold to so and so for
General
Mills for 100 million. So for you guys out there, just definitely keep going. Skew sounds like they're doing something to these brands. Yeah. You got to take credit where credit is due.
It's really the mentors at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Great program with some really solid mentors.
It's working with all those people, I think. So where do you think CPG is heading? Where
in Austin or just in general?
In Austin and in general.
Yeah. Well, in Austin, there's a lot of really exciting things that are happening. Naturally Boulder is a fantastic organization that has a lot of clout within the CPG, especially in the food community. And we are establishing a Naturally Austin that will be launching next month. So that is really exciting to really support all sorts of founders and people who want to do collaborative things within this space, within this ecosystem. And we also, there's a few funds that are being developed to kind of meet that need of, we've kind of exhausted the angel network here, but you're not quite big enough for a traditional VC fund to really come in and, write a bigger check. You don't need the $5 million check. You don't need the $25,000 check anymore. And there's a whole lot of space in between. Yeah. So we're seeing a few funds bubble up to really serve that need in the community.
A lot more money being thrown around, I see.
Yeah, a lot more money. And we also are having a lot of conversations with banks who haven't traditionally banked CPG companies, trying to figure out ways to actually do some traditional banking. Yeah.
Because I think I spoke to a bank a couple times, and they just looked at me like, "You're crazy. We're not going to give you any money. Food CPG, what is that?"
But they're trying to figure it out because it's a pillar here in Austin.
And I think sustainability approaches to our food industry, that's just totally emerging. So more people want to put some money in there because CPG is exploding. People are starting to look at what they're eating, be more concerned with the brands they're supporting and whatnot. So I guess the CPG community is exploding all over the country. So quickly, before we go, any personal advice for food startups from the managing director?
Be innovative and just take your product and get it in front of customers and really, really listen to the feedback you're getting.
Yeah. Keep going.
Just keep going.
Okay. And great advice. If we can plug, so you guys are doing track 7 now.
We're doing track 7 now.
So do we have dates for track 8?
Track 8 will be 2020.
Okay.
Here in Austin. We're in conversations about expanding outside of the Austin, so more to come on that.
Please come to Houston.
Well, Houston isn't too far of a drive from Austin. And applicants, we'll start taking applications this summer. So right before the end of our current track, we'll open it up for applicants, and we're also going to invite anybody who wants to apply for track 8 to come to our showcase day to see kind of what the community that Skew brings together is.
Yeah,
so,
and you don't have to be in Texas.
You don't have to be in Texas. I've got a farmer from Oklahoma with a CBD water driving down every week. I've got somebody flying in from Palo Alto, somebody driving in from Houston.
Yeah. Do you guys have a Brazilian?
Yeah, so that's the gentleman who has this fantastic home cleaning supply company.
Awesome.
Brazilian, but living in Palo Alto.
And are these products already market tested? These are
market validated. There's one company that is just doing pre-orders right now, but they have the products, manufacturing all lined up. They're just they need to flip on the switch and hit go. Yeah.
So if you have a market validated product, you can apply on Skew's website. You can just Google Skew ATX.
If you go to Skew ATX, we don't have the apply button ready now. Not yet, but you can click on Contact Us, and it's info@skew.is, and that will get an email over to us, and we are keeping a nice big log of companies that we're going to reach out to and make sure that we tell them exactly when the link to apply is up.
And again, summer 2019 is when you guys are going to applications.
Yep.
And then, so lastly, quickly, I like asking all my guests this, but if you can advise people on how do you manage what you want to do, what you should do, and what you have to do? Because those are all different things to me.
I guess when I want to do something and I'm doing it with the right intentions, they all kind of line right all up together. I'll pour my energy into anything that I really need to do because I want to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So you merge all of them together.
Try to merge them.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Kirstin. I'm glad you came on the show. I hope some people come and apply on Skew, and we can just keep making Texas boom as the upcoming CPG state.
I hope so. It's headed that way. So thank you so much, Axel. I appreciate it.
Thank you.